Welcome. Today we are chatting with a fabulous New York attorney, and we're going to talk about home studies. So when you're going through the adoption process, some states require a home study. We want to kind of break it down for you, make it a little less scary, a little less intimidating. And so why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jenna. Thanks for having me. My name is Lisa Goldberg. I'm an adoption attorney in Westchester County in New York. We work with adoptive parents and birth expectant parents all throughout New York, mostly mid to lower New York. And we do private adoptions, not an agency. So it's sometimes called independent adoption. And in New York State, the adoptive parents are required to have a home study as part of their pre-certification process. You're required as an adoptive parent to be certified as an adoptive parent before you can bring a baby home. And part of your certification is obtaining a home study by a licensed master of social work or a licensed social worker who has experience in doing home studies in the adoption arena. You can get your home study from an agency, an adoption agency, or from a private social worker who does adoptions.
Okay. So, and this is also for couples who are going through the second parent adoption or step parent adoption process. So
Exactly,
same sex
exactly.
couples, even doing reciprocal IVF or IUI, that if you're going to go through this process, you even have to have this home study done.
Yes, that's true. So even if you're a second parent in a same-sex relationship or in a opposite sex relationship, and you've lived in the home with your child for a year or longer, you no longer have to do this pre-certification process, but you still have to submit a home study to the court. And part of the home study is showing the court that you are financially viable to be a legal parent for this child, that you are medically healthy enough to be a legal parent to this child, that you have had discussions about your rights and responsibilities with someone other than, when you reach the court, about what it means to adopt a child. And well, I can get into the details of what a social worker will ask you about if you're ready, unless you have
Yeah.
some
Yeah,
questions
no.
prior.
Yeah, no, I think just that in a lot of states in the US, it is part of the process. Unfortunately for, we talked about, like, in our case, we didn't have to based on where we live, but, a lesbian couple where, we went through reciprocal IVF and Jordana had to adopt her own biological child would have to go through this invasive home study. But again, we can play the gratitude game all day long. I'm so grateful we can adopt our kids and have the protections and all of that. But we just want to provide you with a little bit of information on just kind of what to expect and how the process of a home study works. So,
Sure.
so this normally would take place during the pregnancy then?
No, it really, well, let me just back up and say that in New York, there's a second parent and step parent adoption. It's really the exact same thing. It's nomenclature. Basically, if you're married in New York, it's called a step parent adoption. If you're not married, but you're intimate partners living together, it's called a second parent adoption. So I'm sort of using that interchangeably, as are you, and that's fine. And it's the same rights and responsibilities for the adoptive parents. Um, you you can't petition the court for an adoption until the baby is born. So the home study is really part of the process after the baby's here. Okay. The social worker needs to meet with the child and needs to be able to report to the court that there's a bonding that has happened between the child and the adoptive parent as well. So that's all part of the home study. So that's why you wouldn't do it pre-birth. Okay, this is different from a pre-birth parentage order, which
Right.
we've talked about, with the New York law allowing for that. This is adoption. And so the home study is part of a process where the social worker comes to your home and does a brief home inspection, if you will, meets the child or the infant, meets both parents or the single parent if this is a single parent adoption, and reports back to the court. The home study is simply a report to the court that tells the court, it's kind of like your resume, tells the court who you are and why this child is in a safe space and why it's safe for the court to move forward with an adoption of this child. And I think that people should look at the social worker as part of their team in adoption and not the enemy and not someone who's trying to trip them up. And I always get clients who say, you know, which what should we do with the dog? Should we tie him up outside? Or, do we need to put out cheese and crackers? You should not be afraid of the social worker who's coming to your home. This is somebody who is practiced in adoption for a long time. In many instances, they're adoptive parents themselves and very favorable towards the adoption community. Um, your attorney should give you the names and contact information from more than one person so that you can call and kind of interview your interviewer on the phone, maybe before they come to your house, and just sort of make sure you have a connection with your social worker before you hire them. Um,
So that's
you
nice
can
that you
hire
do have a say in,
Oh,
you know,
100%. Absolutely. And
okay.
any adoption agency that's licensed in New York will have social workers on staff that can come out and do your home study for you. It's typically more expensive to hire an agency to do your home study than a private social worker who does adoption home studies. I work with several private adoption social workers, and they're wonderful. My clients love them. I have actually joked with my clients, partially seriously, over the years and said, if you don't love so and so, I will take you guys anywhere you want out to dinner. And they always call me and say, she was fabulous. We loved her. Thank you so much for sharing this person with us. So it feels invasive until it happens. They come in, they're respectful. They're not looking for dust bunnies under your bed. They're just making sure that your home has been prepared for safety for a child, for a baby, that you have had the requisite learning that you may need to bathe your child, that you're on board. She'll talk with you or he'll talk with you about your parenting philosophies, um, how you were raised, your extended families, your support system, um, kind of identify any issues that you may as a family have or be concerned about, and give you resources for those issues if there are any. Um, she may bring up religion, and have you, if you're of different religious backgrounds, have you discussed how you're going to raise the child? She's really there to just kind of make sure you guys are all on the same page, and moving forward, if there are any issues, where do you need help? Make sure that the child's been getting to a pediatrician. She's going to need pediatric reports. She's going to need healthcare reports on yourselves. Do you have your regular physicals? Um, if there are any medical concerns, do you have backup guardians named? I mean, these are also questions that your attorney is going to be asking you, and that your attorney will certify for the court. So it's some ways it's a affirmation of what you're already putting together with your attorney for the court. Typically, she'll ask for financials, if you're working, your W-2s, or maybe your tax returns. We certainly want to make sure that a child is being adopted by someone who can financially care for this child, so this child's not going to end up in social services. And the same applies whether you're a single parent or you're a married or unmarried, heterosexual or same-sex couple. It's the same focus, maybe with a few tweaks if you're single versus a couple.
Mhm. I didn't know that you could choose your own social worker. So that makes me feel better with telling people that you have to go through this. I thought it was someone that was just like assigned to you from the court, and
Well, it's
then you
good
never
that you
know.
actually that you bring that up. Two things. Your adoption attorney should give you a couple of options. Most of us work with one or two social workers that we're very comfortable with, and we've worked with a long time, and we know that they do. They're not only respectful of our clients, but they do a good job with the report. That the report will be accepted by the court and not rejected for lack of um, a full exam or a full investigation. So I think that it is good practice for an attorney to offer a couple of names and contacts and let the clients decide who they want, who they connected with on the phone, who they want to move forward with, or perhaps even just who has the most reasonable fee structure.
Yeah.
So, um, however, a lot of attorneys probably just give the clients one name and number to call to get their home study
Mm,
done. So what people should know is that you can ask your attorney for more than one name and number.
okay.
Okay. The other thing is you mentioned you thought that maybe the courts assigned, and that's a great, that brings me to a great point. There are some courts, not all courts in New York, but some counties have family court probation, and they will send out um, a probation social worker to the home to do the home study or to do an investigative report. And it's free, or it's a very nominal fee, very nominal, maybe $100, compared to what your own private social worker may charge. Um, and some courts will allow you, given depending on your financial situation, to use the court's probation department,
Okay.
rather than submitting your own private home study. Not all courts will let you do this. Some courts may require a threshold of financial, hardship to be shown, and it takes a lot longer. So if
Mm.
you're in a rush and you want this done, hire your own social worker, an independent social worker, but nonetheless private, and get it done and submit it to the court and move forward,
Right.
because waiting for the court person to have time to come out and then another month or 3 weeks to write their report, and it can really slow things down.
Right. So how long, I'm curious, so how long does the process typically take from, the child's born till we get second parent adoption, step parent adoption, like order?
Pre-COVID or during COVID?
Pre-COVID. Let's do
Pre-COVID.
pre-COVID.
Yeah, it's a pretty streamlined process. You reach out to your attorney. There's some paperwork she has to create for you. You get it signed. You get some, follow up with some documents. If you've been previously married, you need a divorce judgment. Most courts require to see your marriage certificate if you are married. If you've ever been arrested, we have to get dispositions of your prior arrests, that sort of thing. So by the time we sort of pull together, you need your letters of reference, your medical reports, everything, and we put together your petition and your packet to go to the court. It can take a few weeks. It can take about a month for the clients to get everything together to file with the court. While they're pulling everything together, I usually suggest that they set up their home study um, interview so that the social worker at least has come out to the house, met the child, met the family, and can start her report. Her report is not necessary for filing for the adoption, so that won't hold you up. You
Okay.
file everything you have, you file with the court, you wait for a docket number. Once you get the docket number, I typically have the social worker file her home study under our docket number, so it doesn't just float around in the court and potentially get lost and not catch up to our case. Um, all of this can take a month or two, and then the clients have to get fingerprinted. Um, in the old days before COVID, I would say 3 to 4 months from start to finish to get that order. With COVID, the courts are so incredibly backed up. It can still take 3 to 4 months. It can take 5 to 6 months.
Right. So what happens, God forbid something were to happen to the gestational parent?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's why it is so important to do this process, to either get an adoption order, or now under the new Child Parent Security Act, potentially to get a judgment of parentage. I recommend as soon as you have a baby, and you have a spouse that's not a legal parent, that you write a will.
Right.
Um, you've got to protect your child, because um, you can go to court if family members or someone else is trying to take guardianship of your child, and you can show that there was an intent on the part of your now deceased spouse or partner for you to be the second parent, a legal parent, not the second parent, but a legal parent.
Right.
But why would you want to litigate that, right?
Yeah.
Just get this adoption order, or get this parenting judgment, or
Right.
write a will. You
Right.
have to
Because
do the
that's
responsible thing.
right, right. And but that's also what I'm thinking of, like that gap of like, what if, God forbid, the gestational parent dies in childbirth? There's this gap period of the adoption process. And so that's
Right.
really where the will comes into play and guardianship of the child, I guess, right?
Right. I mean, I suppose you could always do a witnessed guardianship, sort of like a living will type of thing, just something so
Something.
that, yeah, yeah.
Right,
Um,
right,
because you never know when the family is going to step in and try to contest your rights. Um,
right. It's happened,
right. Well, God forbid
and
you're out of town and you haven't done the adoption order and something happens to your spouse.
right,
Um, yeah, you just never want to be in a position where you have to prove your parentage, your connection, your legal rights to your child.
right, right. I scanned our adoption certificate into my phone to have. I mean, we're not going anywhere these days, but just to have, I mean,
Right, right, right. That's a great idea.
fortunately, right, just to have proof of whatever, because my son at least was the spitting image of my wife. They would say to me, like, even though I'm the one who gave birth, they would be like, who are you? Which is just so weird that then I wasn't the one to have to adopt. The laws are backwards and all that.
You know what? It's weird, but you can flip it and just say, isn't life grand right now that we have these opportunities, that the law is catching up to the realities, and that
Yeah,
both society and the law is catching up to the realities of
yeah.
same-sex unions and families and family formation. And
Hmm.
it's slow going, but we're going in the right direction in a lot of places, especially in New York. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely can play the gratitude game and all of that, but want to
yeah,
acknowledge, my community, and that it's hard. It's we've most of us have spent a lot of money on fertility, and now this is an extra cost. But it's such an important step to take to just secure your rights, and
yeah,
knowing that you would do anything for your child. Like, this is such an important thing to do for your child, to do for your spouse, your partner, just to make sure that everyone's protected. God forbid something were to happen. I talk a lot about that. A lot of what we do in the law is just proactive, just in case something were to happen. We kind of do have to go to the negative. Um,
yeah.
and then kind of think of worst case scenario, but it's so that we can protect you from it. Um,
Well, I
so
hate to say this, but I mean, I have a very case in point. I have a living example where I represented two moms. One carried their first son, and I did the step parent adoption for the other mom for their first little boy. We started the process um, with their second child, their second little boy, and they got divorced, and we never finished the adoption. We never did the adoption. We never actually filed because they started having some problems, and one mom got sick, and then they started having problems, and they ended up divorced. And the second mother never adopted her second child. So you can guess now what's going on, right?
no,
Yeah, it's yeah.
it's so
So
sad.
custody fights and the whole thing. And she never protected her rights towards her little boy.
Right.
They had every intention of her being the parent for that little boy. And I think she's going to win. I don't do divorce and child custody, so I'm not involved in that. But, but what a shame that she has to
Yeah.
go through this bitter legal battle now to establish her rights to her son.
Right.
Um, if they just hadn't put it off, if we had just done that adoption, there'd be no question.
Right. And it's so hard when like when you're young and you're in love and you just had a baby, and it's like nothing is going to happen to us, and but things do, and
Right.
so that's why it's just really important to protect that. And thank you for sharing just the information about the home study. I feel better about now that, like, you can choose your own social worker, and it's really like thinking of them as part of your team, I think is such a beautiful way to look at it. And it's not someone that's coming in to nitpick every little thing to then be able
Oh,
to say
no.
they are not fit to be a parent. um
Right.
because I guess my fear would be like in states where people are not as open and it's not as progressive, that people would kind of be that way. but if people are, if you're, I think, you're saying that like, look, a lot of people that go into this field have been through it themselves and or are just used to
Yeah.
kind of going through it and seeing the emotional journeys that people go through, that they really want to go to bat for you. That I
Yeah. I
think,
mean, I think in 11 years of practicing on my own, I've had one situation that definitely comes to mind. Maybe there were two times where a social worker has called me and said, I'm really uncomfortable with this situation. And it wasn't so much a step or a second parent adoption. I think it was certifying. It was in the process of certifying clients prior to them having a match and bringing a child home. And it was a situation where the one of the adoptive parents had a large number of arrests, and they weren't in the real distant past.
got it.
Some of them were a little too recent for comfort,
Sure.
like a DUI that was a little too recent for comfort, that sort of
Mhm.
thing. Just didn't indicate a person who had really matured. And she was uncomfortable promoting them to a court as potential
Right.
adoptive parents. And I respected that. And I
Yeah.
talked to the clients and we walked it back because, I'm not going to push anyone to take to a court something that they're uncomfortable with.
Of course.
And I think that was really the only time that I can remember where I had a social worker feel uncomfortable with adoptive families.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, it's good to know. It's good to know. So hopefully people feel a little bit better, for those who have to go
yeah.
through it. And um,
Yeah. On my website, I actually have an article or two about what is the home study, what can you expect, and how do you
cool.
find a social worker. So it's under buildingnyfamilies.com.
We'll
And
put
my
the link in there.
resources. Yeah, and hopefully that will also give people a little bit more comfort and try to approach the home study as not something to be afraid of, but someone to consider um, a member of your family formation team.
Perfect. Perfect. I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that wisdom. And yeah, we'll put the link in the down below, all of that, so people can find that and find you and contact you if this is something that they are looking for. If you guys are in New York, in the not all the way up top,
Oh yeah,
more
yeah.
not all the way up in Albany.
I'll go as far as Putnam or maybe Orange.
Perfect.
Okay,
There we go. Then you can reach out
terrific.
to Lisa. But thank you again.
Thanks, Jenna. Have a great day.